Aloha everybody, we are back and we are getting ready to make some drinks.
What are we making today?
I don't know, you know what? I think we should make a painkiller.
A painkiller, okay, what's in that? What kind of rum do I need to get?
Okay, well, we're making a painkiller, so we can't do a painkiller unless we use some Pusser's rum.
Okay, I think I have a bottle of that.
You do have one?
Yep, let
me
check the cabinet.
Okay.
Of course I do.
Ooh. Oh, we're so lucky. That would have been rough.
What else is in it?
A painkiller's a classic, almost a cousin of the pina colada, so we're definitely going to need some coconut cream. We're going to need some pineapple juice. We're definitely going to need a little bit of orange juice to certainly accentuate a little bit of the citrus notes. But man, this is a really good cocktail, well balanced. A lot of people always say it's too sweet, but I think it just hits the right notes. It is on the heavier side, but a drink can be refreshing, heavy, and so boozy. Oh man, but ice is key.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have to shake it really hard.
Shake it good.
Yeah, we have to really get that dilution, and then we're just gonna put a little bit of nutmeg and cinnamon on top.
I can't wait. I'm gonna get my cup ready.
And
and stay tuned to the end of this episode because we're gonna have a history lesson on the painkiller.
Really? Again, history?
Oh yeah, we love history here.
Man. And for all our friends out there that aren't seeing, where can we see this video? That we're
on
making
YouTube. Go straight to our YouTube. We have Tune In Tiki on YouTube, so you can watch it as well. So listen in your car, and then when you get home, watch our episode.
What? That is wild. All right, everybody. So let's time to tune in.
It's time to tune in.
Welcome, Tiki enthusiasts and curious minds, to another exciting episode of Tune In Tiki.
We're your hosts, the Jersey Pineapple
and Dr. Diz.
And today we're shaking things up with a special guest who's an expert in the art of cocktails. Joining us is Garret Richard, the author of Tropical Standard. Get ready to embark on a journey through exotic flavors, creative mixology, and the world of crafting unforgettable drinks. Whether you're a seasoned bartender or just a curious sipper, this episode is sure to quench your thirst for cocktail knowledge.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Garret.
It's so good to be here. I'm so glad to be at the launch of this, basically.
So let's delve on Tropical Standard. I know that it brings us a unique approach to cocktails. So can you tell us more about the inspiration behind the book and what readers can expect to discover?
When I was thinking about Tropical Standard, I was obviously looking at the other books that were in the canon already. And Smuggler's Cove does a really great job of talking about rum, and Jeff Berry's, multiple books that I've studied, a lot of my whole life, are great on history and archiving and, really taking you back to the, era that these drinks were created in. But I felt like there was really a need for a book that talked about technique and that could really, explain to somebody what flash blending is, how to do it, what are the mechanics of it, how can you make a good frozen drink, and what are the steps for that. And in going over all the techniques of how to do this, I realized that there was a second story to tell, which is that within the last 10 or so years, there's been a lot of new techniques that have come into cocktails that I think improve the genre as a whole and make tropical and tiki cocktails better. And that really goes back to my time when I was pre-COVID working at Existing Conditions in Rain's Law Room. And Existing Conditions was opened by Dave Arnold and Don Lee, and Dave and Don were at the cutting edge of creating a lot of these techniques like acid adjusting and using liquid nitrogen and all that stuff. And I was learning that and working there every day. And then I was doing a pop-up every about 2 months at the Rain's Law Room, where we would just go through different tiki tropical drinks that we wanted to do. We had a new menu every time of 9 different drinks. And what ended up happening is more and more the techniques I was doing at Existing were coming into the menu at Exotica at my pop-up. And this book, it's really a fusion of those two things. It's also just a reevaluation of some certain techniques and saying, do we need to look to the past or do we need to look to the future to, make this drink sing and make this drink as good as possible?
We refer to mixology as both an art and a science. So how would you strike the perfect balance between a traditional cocktail technique and the reinvention of recipes to create something truly exceptional?
Yeah, it's definitely there's a ghost in the machine sometimes with cocktails where like if you think about a drink that like on paper doesn't make sense, like the last word, right? like like if you just read it and didn't know what a last word was, it's probably not going to be a good drink, but it works, right? So there's definitely like an art side of it that's hard to explain, but I would say for me and for a lot of the work that me and my co-author Ben Schaefer did in Tropical Standard is we like to look at the roots of a drink and then even look at other historical precedent for a drink that may not necessarily seem related but is there. Like a good example is we have a reinvention in the book of the Tiki Tea's lemon head cocktail, right? And we go back and talk about, where it came from, the 70s, lemon drop, really popular. But then looking at what the Tiki Tea does, they muddle a bunch of lemons into it. In that conversation, we're able to talk about Dale DeGroff at the Rainbow Room in the 1990s when he created the Whiskey Smash. And then where he got that inspiration from, which was Jerry Thomas in the 1890s, doing things like whiskey cobblers. So for us in like recreating a tiki tea drink that probably came from the later half of the 20th century, we kind of bop around time and look at a lot of different areas, because that's the thing with like cocktails is they sort of echo over time, and one drink may inspire thousands, and also like certain specs you may inadvertently be referencing stuff, that happens all the time.
Now, crafting cocktails is an experience that engages all the senses. How do you approach the sensory aspects of cocktail making, and how can enthusiasts elevate their home bartending game?
Yeah, the sense thing, it's obviously like twofold, because there's what's actually in the glass and then how it's presented. And I think a big thing, especially within the book and at Sunken Harbor Club, which is the bar I'm running in Brooklyn currently, flash blending is a huge technique that helps aroma and like sensory perception like improve dramatically in a cocktail. For anyone that's not familiar, flash blending was created in the 1930s, most likely by Don the Beachcomber, but it has references and uses even before Don's time during the soda fountain era in the 1920s. And the Hamilton Beach Flash Blender was created in the early 20th century around 1919. The first one was called the Cyclone. But the cool thing about a flash blended drink is it's basically an electrified swizzle stick that you put your cocktail in, it froths up the drink, and it puts a ton of air and a lot of texture that you wouldn't necessarily have in a shaken or a stirred cocktail. And when you present a flash blended drink, the bubbles on top actually open up the cocktail more and lighten up some of the flavors that you would, necessarily have in a shaken drink. Like some, think things like coconut, pineapple, honey, and the aromatics of a flash blended drink actually travel to your nose better than something shaken. And there's a lot of drinks in the classic canon that use absinthe and really highly aromatic things that when you use flash blending, it's just 10 times better of a cocktail. I always say to folks that the first time you have a flash blended crushed ice drink is almost like the first time that you have a old fashioned that's on a big rock, where you're like, wow, this is just like a world of difference and I can perceive so much more. So I'd say that's a big thing. I do love with like aromatics, I do love playing with like spraying absinthe on the side of a glass or even scenting mint. On my book tour, I was able to do the Bamboo Room in Chicago, which is the smaller room at Three Dots and Dash. And one of the cocktails, we actually scented the mint with macroot lime oil. So like when you went into the drink, you were actually able to perceive the lime even before you got to taste it, which is really cool. And that's a trick we talk about in the book, and we picked up from Audrey Saunders. When she was running Pega Club, she would sometimes spray essential oils on coasters or napkins, and maybe that flavor wasn't even necessarily in the drink, but it was kind of an accent. And I think that's a really cool thing. You don't see that too often.
Wow. I know that in your book, you cover a massive range of cocktail recipes. So can you share with us one that is a favorite of yours in your book, Tropical Standard, and give us a glimpse of the flavor, the profile, and preparation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard because there's 84 recipes. And then, there's beyond just the recipes for the cocktails, there's like sub recipes for syrups and stuff, which has been cool to see online, people using the syrups outside of the book and just adapting them to their own recipes. But I digress. Okay, so I'll say two because I just can't pick one. But if I was to do something that's sort of like, I'll do a new school and old school. New school, I would say especially I've been making it a lot on the tour, so I've been drinking it, is I really love the Bay of Pigs cocktail. It's when we wrote Tropical Standard, we wanted to have a section of stirred tropicals because it's kind of a genre that doesn't really exist, classically speaking. Like, there's a few. There's the El Presidente, the tea punch is kind of a stirred drink, but it's a brand new genre, in terms of like, thinking about things like Campari and vermouths and all that stuff. And the Bay of Pigs is essentially, it's an old fashioned that uses all the flavors of a Cuba Libre. And the sweetener in the old fashioned, we use the grog concentrate that we use also in the Navy grog in the book. And that's a lot of archaeology to remix the secret Trader Vic's grog concentrate. But yeah, we basically build it with an aged rum and a light rum, and then we stir it with some lime cordial, the grog concentrate, some Angostura bitters, and the very smallest amount of tonic syrup, because tonic syrup kind of gives it this like nice bitterness and kind of replaces the effervescence that isn't there in a normal Cuba Libre. But it's cool because it's a stirred drink that has a lot of acidity. There's acidity from the lime cordial, and it kind of makes people's head shake a little bit and go back for more, which is really cool. And I would say the classic old school drink that I really love is the Blue Hawaii. Even way before Tropical Standard was even an idea, at Exotica, it was probably one of our most popular drinks. We had it on the regular menu at Rain's Law Room. I was able to do a couple articles with Punch about the Blue Hawaii, and I made it a lot for myself during the pandemic when all we were doing was making cocktails. So I knew it had to be a part of the book, and I think it has a special place because Harry Yee was trying to create cocktails that were identifiably Hawaiian and not necessarily like from the continent, and that were unique to him. And to be able to then tell that story and then update it and remix it, I think it's a privilege. So yeah.
The 1970 classic that originated from the British Virgin Islands. Now, it was created by Daphne Henderson at the Soggy Dollar Bar, a bar known for guests docking and swimming straight to her and placing their wet soggy dollar bills on top. Now, with the success of the bar, Daphne decided to make her own concoction, so she grabbed Pusser's rum, made this fancy cocktail, and it was a huge success. Now, here's where the controversy starts. Charles Tobias, owner of Pusser's Rum, requested for years to get the recipe of this cocktail. Now, she wouldn't budge. She would not give out such information, but somehow he managed to get a drink in his hand that he was able to reverse engineer. And by doing so, he presented it to her. And guess actually enjoyed it just as much. So he patented the drink, and now we all enjoy the Painkiller. Of course, made with Pusser's rum. Now, you can make a painkiller with any rum, just don't call it a painkiller. Something that I always like to talk about the Painkiller, especially on the profile and how it tastes when guests come, because it's heavily associated with a nice beach, refreshing pool cocktail. So, taking inspirations from the pina colada, we must always acknowledge that they're both cousins tied to the hip. It takes a little bit less of the creamier notes of the coconut cream. It definitely raises the par by raising the citrus notes with fresh pineapple and orange. And you immediately get that aroma that accentuates heavily with the hints of nutmeg on top. And oh so boozy. Oh, it's like you get a meal in every cup.
For those who are new to mixology, starting can feel a bit overwhelming. What advice do you have for beginners who want to dive into the world of crafting their own cocktails?
Yeah, I would say obviously this book is almost like an intermediate cocktail book, but I have had a couple of people that have basically started with this book and have been really happy with the results. So there are like some small little things that we teach that I think improve like home bartending game immediately, which is great. Small things first, I would say, is having a good focus on ice at home will help you significantly. In the book, we talk about sort of different sizes of ice and what types of ice work when. But like a good example is if you want to up your shaken drink game at home and have it be even better than some of the cocktail bars you go to in your city, shake with one big cube of ice and then 2 small cubes of ice. This was our house shake at existing conditions. It's something that Dave Arnold tested on stage with like a million different bartenders and then landed on this style. But basically, the idea is that the big cube is going to aerate your cocktail, provide a lot of texture. But if you just had the big cube, you would be shaking like crazy, and you may not get enough water. The small cubes will break down while the big cube is going around in the shaker and give you the proper water content that you need, the proper chill that you need. So you're getting the best of both worlds. And thanks to Amazon and a million different cocktail bar gear websites, it's pretty easy to make big cubes at home now. You can get a silicone mold, something that's about 2 inches, perfect to shake with. So I would definitely say that's a big step. Salting your drinks is a great way to improve cocktails quickly at home, and we talk about salt pretty extensively in Tropical Standard. It's in most of the recipes, but the quick answer is that you have a lot of different flavors that go on your tongue, right? Bitter, sweet, sour, and salt is a really good way to connect all those layers in your tongue and help you perceive the bitterness and the acidity of a lime with the sweetness of a syrup and separate those layers out on your tongue a little bit better. My bartenders say this all the time when people ask about salt, but the quick answer is you salt your food. Why would you not salt your drinks? I would say ice and salt is a great way to start.
Yeah, in our seminar, you were saying that you have a saline wash that you do, and that's so awesome when it comes to like salting your drinks. So,
which is super quick to make. It's only it takes 1 minute, if you have a scale. But if you're at home and you're only making drinks every once in a while, you can pinch salt in there. The reason we make the saline solution is 1, to measure it better, and 2 is because bartenders' hands are usually wet. So
now. I know innovation often stems with experimentation. So can you share an instance where you pushed the boundaries of traditional mixology and came up with a surprising yet delightful cocktail combination?
Yeah, there's some weird drinks in the book, but a few that have paid off. Obviously, the ones that didn't aren't in the book. But the Minoan cocktail is I think a weirdo for sure, and the whole savory chapter, I think for people that are sort of like hardcore Tiki files will probably be a little bit scared of, but it was important for me to write about the confluence of like savory flavors in these types of drinks, because I think traditionally they were served with food that was like highly flavorful, things that have five spice and, thinking about Cantonese and Szechuan Chinese and what have you. But, about 10 years ago in New York, the most common order was like for spicy or like salty drinks. And that like dominated any cocktail bar that you went to. So uh, for me, it was kind of important to like tell that story and also be like, look, it doesn't just have to be a jalapeno margarita. But the drink that I'm referring to was called the Minoan, and it was inspired by Marble Bar in Minnesota. Marble Bar had a really cool cocktail called the Oliveto, which used olive oil, and they were kind of creating like a gin sour that tasted like an olive oil cake. It's probably the best way I can describe it. And I made it for myself. That was really cool, and made me think about all these rums that had come out at the time that were super savory. Like the St. George Agua Libre had just come out. The rums from Mexico, like Paranubis, and a few were just starting to creep into the market, and I loved them. I thought they were so different and exciting to mix with, and kind of broke the rules of what we normally think about for cane spirits, because they have just such a long fermentation. They get all these like savory, like black garlic and truffle notes to them. So I thought about the Oliveto and was like, what if you could do a daiquiri that uses olive oil, but have it lean more towards these savory notes that are in Paranubis and whatnot. So the drink is lime and lime punch, which is a syrup that's in the book, with some egg white and olive oil. The egg white and the olive oil emulsify each other, so the olive oil doesn't separate out. And then it uses a rum from Oaxaca. In the book, we call for Paranubis, but you can use Daca Bend. There's options you can use. And then a little bit of olive brine, actually, instead of saline solution. And it sounds insane, but we just served it. I served it at the Bamboo Room as the final course, and everyone was like so surprised and so delighted by it. And the texture of like olive oil and egg white together is like, it's almost like coming off of a Guinness tap. It's really incredible, and the drink plays into all those notes that are already in the spirit. And I think having like this sort of like salty, almost like briny daiquiri sour, it works. It's weird though.
The cocktail culture has its own trends and fads. How do you balance incorporating current trends while maintaining the timeless appeal of a well-crafted cocktail?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think especially with social media, it's very easy to get bogged down in like, okay, like what's the drink of the moment? Like, it was like the Aperol Spritz, and espresso martini seems to just be like a zombie that comes back over and over again. But for me, I think it goes back to my training at existing conditions. Is when we were first trained there, we were told a good drink to work on is to find a problem that you care about, or find like something that's bothering you about a cocktail, and like work on it and see if something comes about with it. And honestly, like most of the drinks in Tropical Standard are that, where it's like, oh, this doesn't work for me. Like, how can I learn more about it so that it does? Good example is like the strawberry daiquiri in the book, which a lot of folks have been making. And it took us a long time to like get that strawberry daiquiri to a point where we were like, this is an awesome cocktail. but because it's the joke of daiquiris, right? Is the strawberry daiquiri. But after we put some time into it, studied some like old Cuban stuff, some new stuff, we were able to really get it to a place where it's a good cocktail now. But these things are more and more a dialogue now, because you have your guests talking to you on social media, you have readers talking to you on social media, and it's way more fluid and way more of a back and forth. But I think in general, for me, the drinks that I really put effort into are personal and things that I care about. Like something I'm working on right now is I love studying soda fountain stuff. So like for me, like all I'm making right now is like cherry syrup from the 20s that has like wild cherry bark. And like at some point that might be useful in something that is like in a drink that people care about currently, like who knows, maybe the blood and sand will become popular. But it's balancing, I think, those two things of like consumer needs and demands with what you care about and what you're passionate about, and seeing what problems you can solve or at least play around with, and see if they're successful or not.
So, Tropical Standard, Garret Richards, we're so thankful and grateful for you joining us on this episode of Tune In Tiki and talking shop and exploring all the flavors. We really want to say thank you for joining us.
And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Go out and get the book. You know where to find it. And join us next on the next episode of Tune In Tiki. Aloha, listeners.
Please check out our Patreon, the 1944 Society.
What's that?
Well, Christina, if you know, you know.
Subscribe for more, everyone. Patreon.com/TuneInTiki.